Hi, I'm Alexa, and this is a presentation about Georgia's East Coast problems. In terms of the geography, there are 14 barrier islands. There are quite a lot of salt marshes and other wetlands, estuaries, and all of these serve very important ecological functions, and so it would probably be good for Georgia to protect them. However, they face a lot of threats that we need to protect them from. Some of these include climate change, natural disasters, beach erosion, etc. With climate change and sea level rise in particular, it's not just the natural communities that need protecting, but also the human communities as well. So estimates for the end of the century vary from a foot to 6 feet of sea level rise. When you live on the coast and your house is at about like 5 feet above sea level, that's going to be a little bit of a problem. And there's also been an increase in tidal flooding. So that's when tides reach around 2 feet above the average high tide, which, yeah, that's pretty problematic. For example, in this infographic, you'll be able to see the conversion of landmass to seawater with these sea level rises. So this is Tybee Island, which is one of the most developed barrier islands on the coast. With 3 feet of sea level rise, it's already halfway disappeared. 6 feet, you don't have any barrier islands anymore. That'll be an incredible loss. And already these local communities have to deal with problems in terms of flooding affecting their daily lives. So Highway 80 is the main road to and from Tybee Island. Once this is flooded, which it does quite a few days of the year, you can't get to school, you can't get to work. With just 1 foot of sea rise, it's going to be underwater 100 times annually, which is almost a third of a year. And for many residents who depend on going to the mainland, that just really isn't great. And you also have to deal with hurricanes on the East Coast. Thankfully, Georgia's East Coast is relatively protected because of the way that the continent is shaped. So basically Virginia and North Carolina, that kind of area, there's like a little bit of the continent that juts out. So hurricanes kind of naturally are like steered away from our area. However, there are those that create major impacts. For example, Hurricane Sandy, Matthew, Irma. Luckily, Dorian didn't really pose as much of a threat, but because everyone evacuated as they should, there was a major economic loss, which in Savannah, when one of your main industries is tourism, or Savannah and the rest of the East Coast, that's a major economic loss. And so you can kind of see with this tweet some of the major flooding that happens there during these storms. With beach erosion, so sand is a very precious resource when you live on an island that is primarily made of sand. With hurricanes and increased tidal action, you get increased erosion, and with more human activity and development from tourism and just population increase, a lot of that sand can very easily get eroded away. However, we have sand dunes and the natural vegetation that helps protect these beaches. However, as I gave an example, these hurricanes can easily mitigate that protection. In addition, there's also saltwater intrusion, so the east coast of Georgia basically depends on the Floridian aquifer for fresh water. However, saltwater intrusion is when ocean water starts to percolate into the aquifer, and so you don't have any more fresh water anymore. This began to be an issue in the 1950s, first noticed in Brunswick, and what really helps exacerbate this is sea level rise, stronger storm surges, and more demand from the aquifer. And also drought does not help. And saltwater intrusion, it also affects the wetlands that are in this region. So freshwater, brackish wetlands, the plants and animals in these wetlands depend on a certain salinity in the water. And once that salinity reaches a certain point, they cannot live. And for us, humans, for like the loss of fresh water in the aquifer, we can create more water treatment plants. We can find alternative sources of fresh water, such as rainwater. But for these plants, which I have a photo that I took of some of the brackish or freshwater, I'm not really sure which one it is, wetlands. This is the Savannah National Wildlife Refuge. You can get ghost forests, and basically the loss of lots of plant life and fish life. So ghost forests, as you can tell, plants and trees cannot physically get up and move. So once there's a certain salinity that's absorbed through their roots, or they absorb water of a certain salinity through their roots, it kills the plant and you end up with skeletons of dead trees, which are very pretty and they're great for tourism and wedding destinations. But you also get a loss of carbon storage from that. So the rich soil and the plants in these ecosystems, when like they die, they don't have the carbon sequestration that they had. The best case scenario is that cord grasses and other native marsh plants would take over the area, but as any organism, like it needs time to grow. And the question is, will it be able to restore the area faster than it takes for the sea level to rise and make the waters even saltier? There's also the question of human development. And so Savannah's been deepening its harbor from 43 to 48 feet. Dredging affects the coastal waters. So the dissolved oxygen levels, especially upstream and in like the wetlands around it, the dissolved oxygen levels are lowered. This takes away a lot of the life in these areas. It threatens endangered species like the short-nosed sturgeon, and it just puts a lot of organisms at risk. There are solutions to this, such as I think the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, they actually like developed a mechanism, or yeah, to inject oxygen into the waters, which isn't the best solution, but it is a solution. And since humans want economic development, that's what we're going to get. And so this is another example of one of the giant cargo ships that will be increasingly seen in the Savannah River with these deepening projects. There's also the Palmetto Pipeline, which was proposed back in the 2010s. There was a lot of pushback because it went through 5 major coastal rivers and property owners weren't happy with it, and environmental groups weren't happy with it. And so the Georgia Congress responded and strengthened regulations for petroleum pipelines. There's also the concern of seismic testing, or seismic testing and offshore drilling, So since humans, or since America wants economic gain, there's been a lot of talk of trying to get offshore drilling off the East Coast. There was a lot of pushback because of it would risk local species, and one of these local species was this Georgia state marine animal, which was the North Atlantic right whale, and I think there's currently like 400 or 500 of them remaining. So that's pretty important to protect. There was the House Resolution 48, which protected at least the first 3 miles of coastline. So hopefully we won't see that happening. There are solutions to these problems, though. There's living shorelines with bioengineering and native vegetative plantings that stabilize and enhance wetland habitats, as you can see in the corner of the screen there. Beach renourishment, which is unfortunately expensive, and it takes sand from usually like a mile into the ocean and other places. Not the best solution, but it is a solution. You could also develop the coastal region with low impact green infrastructure, which slows saltwater intrusion and erosion. You can add dune fencing and plant sea oats on dunes to help stabilize them. And Tybee's already got its own adaptation plan put in place. There's also the thought of relocating people if things get really bad, but there's a lot of public opposition to this because people don't want to leave their homes. So the most important thing that we can do is educate people about the risks, try to implement and engineer resilient solutions that can help mitigate some of the problems that we face. And that's my presentation. Thank you for watching.